The hospital corridor smelled of antiseptic and quiet tension, the kind that settles into your bones and refuses to leave. Fluorescent lights hummed softly above, casting a pale glow on the polished floor. Nurses moved briskly from room to room, their shoes squeaking faintly, while new fathers paced with phones in their hands and anxious hope in their eyes. In the middle of all this stood a woman whose presence felt sharp and cutting, as if she had brought a storm with her into the maternity ward. She was the mother-in-law, rigid with disapproval, her lips pressed into a thin line as she stared at the door of the room where her daughter-in-law lay exhausted after childbirth. The young woman inside the room was pale, weak, and overwhelmed. She had given birth only hours earlier, her body still trembling from the strain, her heart torn between pain and the fierce, protective love she already felt for the tiny life sleeping beside her. She should have been surrounded by warmth, reassurance, and care. Instead, harsh words echoed through the hallway. The mother-in-law's voice was low but venomous as she insisted that the young woman did not belong there, that she had brought shame, disappointment, and trouble to the family. Nurses exchanged uneasy glances, unsure whether to intervene or hope the confrontation would pass on its own. The accusations came quickly, each one more cruel than the last. She spoke of mistakes, of poor choices, of a future already doomed by the past. Her words cut deeper than any physical wound, and the young mother felt tears burn behind her eyes as she listened from her bed, clutching the blanket around herself. The baby stirred softly, unaware of the conflict raging just beyond the walls. In that moment, the maternity ward felt less like a place of new beginnings and more like a courtroom where her life was being judged without mercy. Just as the situation seemed unbearable, the sound of footsteps echoed from the far end of the corridor. Conversations hushed. Heads turned. A man approached, calm but unmistakably confident, his presence commanding attention without a single word. The mother-in-law continued her tirade until she noticed the sudden silence around her. She turned, ready to snap at whoever dared interrupt her, and froze. Her face drained of color, her mouth falling open as if the words had been ripped from her throat. The unexpected guest stood still, eyes steady, taking in the scene before him. He didn't raise his voice or make any dramatic gesture. He simply looked at her, and somehow that was enough. Nurses paused in their tracks. Visitors stopped pretending not to listen. The air felt thick, heavy with anticipation. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm but firm, carrying the weight of experience and resolve. He talked about accountability, about how the past does not disappear but also does not have to define the future. He spoke of mistakes made, lessons learned the hard way, and the long road toward redemption. Every word landed with precision, not as an attack but as an unflinching truth. The mother-in-law's earlier confidence crumbled. She had expected submission, tears, perhaps anger. She had not expected dignity, strength, and the quiet power of someone who understood what it meant to fall and stand up again. As he continued, the focus shifted from blame to responsibility, from judgment to growth. He made it clear that second chances are not about erasing consequences but about recognizing effort, change, and humanity. The maternity ward, once tense and hostile, began to feel different. Nurses relaxed their shoulders. A few visitors nodded subtly, moved by what they were witnessing. Even the mother-in-law seemed smaller now, confronted not by rage but by reason. Inside the room, the young mother listened, her tears finally spilling over, not from pain this time, but from relief. For the first time since the confrontation began, she felt seen and protected. She looked down at her baby, tracing a tiny finger with her own, and felt a fragile sense of hope take root. The world outside that hospital room was complicated and unforgiving, but in that moment, she believed that her child's future could be different. The exchange didn't end with shouting or dramatic ultimatums. There was no sudden apology, no neat resolution. Instead, there was silence, a heavy, reflective silence that forced everyone involved to confront their own beliefs. The mother-in-law stepped back, her earlier fury replaced with uncertainty. She had been so certain of her judgment, so convinced that punishment was the only answer. Now, faced with the reality of growth and change, she had nothing left to say. As the unexpected guest turned to leave, the tension slowly dissolved. Life in the maternity ward resumed its gentle rhythm. A nurse entered the room to check on the new mother and her baby, offering a warm smile and a quiet word of encouragement. Outside, the mother-in-law stood alone for a moment, staring at the floor as if searching for answers she had never considered before. Elsewhere, on a brightly lit television set, a different but equally intense confrontation had unfolded. Jelly Roll sat across from Joy Behar, the atmosphere thick with unspoken challenge. What began as a routine interview quickly shifted when questions turned toward his past. Joy pressed him on whether he was romanticizing his criminal history, suggesting that his story might send the wrong message. The audience leaned forward, sensing the shift, cameras capturing every flicker of emotion. Jelly Roll didn't flinch. He spoke openly about his past, not with pride but with honesty. He acknowledged the harm he had caused, the mistakes he could never undo. But he also spoke about change, about choosing a different path when it would have been easier to stay the same. His voice carried conviction, shaped by lived experience rather than theory. Joy challenged him again, questioning whether society was too quick to forgive, too eager to celebrate redemption stories. The exchange grew heated, each side refusing to back down. Jelly Roll emphasized that redemption is not a free pass, it is a daily commitment to do better. He argued that denying second chances only ensures that people remain trapped by their worst moments. Joy countered with concerns about accountability and the message sent to victims. The tension was palpable, the studio silent except for their voices. In the end, there was no clear winner, no tidy conclusion. Instead, there was a question left hanging in the air, one that echoed far beyond the studio walls and the hospital corridor alike. How do we balance justice with compassion? How do we hold people accountable without stripping them of hope? And perhaps most importantly, do we believe that people can truly change? Both confrontations, though worlds apart, revolved around the same fragile truth, that second chances are complicated, uncomfortable, and deeply human. They force us to look beyond labels and past actions, to see effort, growth, and potential. Whether in a maternity ward or on national television, the question remains the same. Does society give second chances too easily, or not easily enough? The maternity ward was meant to be a place of quiet joy, where the first cries of newborns blended with whispered congratulations and tired smiles. Yet on that particular day, the air felt heavy, weighed down by tension that had nothing to do with labor pains or sleepless nights. At the center of it all stood a mother-in-law whose stern expression suggested that she had already passed judgment long before stepping through the hospital doors. Her coat was still on, her purse clutched tightly, as if she had come not to celebrate new life but to deliver a verdict. Behind the closed door of a small hospital room lay her daughter-in-law, fragile and exhausted after hours of labor. The young woman stared at the ceiling, her body aching, her mind spinning. She had imagined this moment so differently. She had pictured warmth, support, maybe even reconciliation. Instead, harsh voices from the corridor seeped through the walls, each word landing like a blow. The mother-in-law accused her of ruining her son's life, of being irresponsible, of dragging old mistakes into a future that should have been clean and respectable. Nurses paused nearby, pretending to check charts while listening closely. They had seen family conflicts before, but something about this one felt especially cruel. The daughter-in-law had just given birth, she was vulnerable in a way few moments in life can match. Yet the criticism continued, relentless and unforgiving. The mother-in-law demanded that she leave, claiming she had no right to stay there, no right to be part of the family she had supposedly disgraced. Inside the room, tears slid silently down the young woman's temples and into her hair. She turned her head to look at her baby, a tiny bundle wrapped in white, breathing softly. In that small face, she saw both her fears and her hopes. She whispered a promise that she would do better, that she would protect this child from the bitterness now echoing outside. But even as she made that vow, doubt crept in. Could she really outrun her past when it seemed determined to chase her into every new beginning? The confrontation might have escalated further if not for the sound of footsteps approaching with steady purpose. The voices in the hallway faltered, then fell silent. The mother-in-law turned, irritation flashing across her face, ready to defend her position. Instead, she found herself staring at someone she had not expected to see. Her expression shifted from anger to disbelief, and for a moment she looked as though she had forgotten how to breathe. The unexpected guest didn't raise his voice or accuse her of cruelty. He spoke calmly, deliberately, as if each word had been chosen with care. He talked about the weight of the past and how it can either crush a person or become the foundation for change. He spoke of accountability, of acknowledging harm without allowing it to define an entire lifetime. His tone wasn't confrontational, but it was firm enough to leave no room for dismissal. As he spoke, the mother-in-law's certainty began to unravel. She had come armed with judgment, convinced that harshness was the only way to enforce responsibility. Now she was being asked to consider something far more difficult: compassion without denial, forgiveness without forgetting. The hallway felt smaller, the walls closing in as her confidence drained away. She stood there, speechless, confronted by a perspective she had never allowed herself to entertain. Inside the room, the daughter-in-law listened in stunned silence. With every sentence, a weight lifted from her chest. She wasn't being defended as a victim or excused for her mistakes, she was being acknowledged as a human being capable of growth. That distinction mattered. It gave her strength in a moment when she felt utterly depleted. She tightened her hold on her baby and let herself believe, just for a moment, that her story wasn't already written. Eventually, the tension eased, not because everything had been resolved, but because something had shifted. The mother-in-law stepped back, her posture less rigid, her gaze uncertain. The unexpected guest left as quietly as he had arrived, leaving behind a silence filled with thought rather than hostility. A nurse finally entered the room, her gentle presence a reminder that life, in all its fragility and promise, continued regardless of family drama. That same day, in a television studio miles away, another confrontation captured the attention of millions. Jelly Roll sat across from Joy Behar under bright lights, the audience watching intently. What was meant to be a casual interview took a sharp turn when the conversation shifted to his past. Joy questioned whether his music and public persona risked glorifying a history marked by crime and poor decisions. Her tone was probing, skeptical, unwilling to let the topic slide. Jelly Roll leaned forward, his expression serious. He didn't deny his past or try to soften it. He spoke about jail cells, lost years, and the damage he had caused to himself and others. But he also spoke about change, about waking up one day and realizing that survival wasn't enough, that he wanted to live differently. His words carried the weight of lived experience, not theory. The audience grew quiet, sensing the raw honesty behind his response. Joy pressed on, raising concerns about accountability and the message sent to viewers who might see his success as proof that consequences don't matter. The exchange grew heated, voices overlapping, tension crackling through the studio. Jelly Roll pushed back, insisting that second chances are not rewards handed out lightly but opportunities earned through effort, humility, and consistency. He argued that shutting the door on redemption only guarantees that people remain trapped in their worst moments. There was no dramatic walk-off, no triumphant ending. Instead, the segment closed with unresolved questions hanging in the air. The audience was left to wrestle with the same dilemma that had played out in the hospital corridor earlier that day. How much weight should the past carry? At what point does accountability become a barrier to growth rather than a path toward it? Both scenes, though vastly different in setting, reflected the same struggle. In one, a new mother fought for dignity at the very start of her child's life. In the other, an artist defended the possibility of change on a national stage. Both challenged the idea that people should be permanently defined by their worst mistakes. And both left behind an uncomfortable but necessary question, one that society continues to debate without an easy answer.